This is Joe Carpenter. Today is the 29th of June, 2022, and I'm interviewing Patrick Alcorn for the second time. This interview is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts and is part of the Maverick Veterans Voices Project. Thank you for being here today.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Where are you from originally, and what can you tell me about your growing up?
I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. I was actually born at the University Hospital, part of University of Southern California.
And what about growing up? Did you grow up there too?
I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I attended Hollywood High School, so I had an opportunity to attend school with some of the well-known actors that are out there in this day and age from that time frame.
Do you stay in contact with any of those folks?
I try to stay in contact with as many people as I can, but life keeps moving on and they keep moving on.
Were any of your family members in the military?
None of my direct family members were part of the military. I had cousins and uncles who were part of the military. In fact, I had one cousin who was a Marine, or you never say was a Marine, is a Marine. And I can remember as we were growing up, we were young kids, and he would come home from San Diego and come visit us at our home and stay with us during his time on leave. And he would always have us marching around the house. It wasn't until later in life that I realized that he was a corporal as opposed to an officer, the way he would have us saluting him at the time.
How did you become interested in joining the military?
So early on, about the age of 9, I was a Marine Corps Devil Pup. The Marine Corps Devil Pup is similar to the Boy Scouts, but it's on the Marine Corps base at Camp Pendleton, San Diego. We did the same thing Boy Scouts did in terms of tying knots and pledges and all the other stuff, but we had some additional things that we did that were connected to the military. So we marched, we performed in parades, we did rifle twirling and all the different rifle drills that you see in a color guard. And we also had some military, quasi-military exercises. So we got an opportunity to ride around in some armored personnel carriers and some amphibious vehicles along the beach at Coronado Beach and so forth. And I did that from about age 9 to about age 12. That was my introduction to the military and to being excited about being part of the military.
And when did you go into the military?
So at Hollywood High School, while I was in high school, I worked for the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Tom Bradley. He's a 6th-term African-American mayor of Los Angeles, California. And when I came into work one day, Mayor Bradley said, "So Patrick, where are you going to college?" And this was in my senior year. I had several offers to many of the Pac-10 schools, both academic, football, and track, so athletic scholarships as well as academic scholarships, to many of the Pac-10 schools, Arizona State, USC, UCLA, and several other. That's all I really knew about college at the time, was following the Pac-10 and those sports programs.
Right.
And the next day I came into work, Mayor Bradley said, "Come on, take a ride with me." So I get in the car, we go across town, we end up in a small city called Inglewood, right outside of Los Angeles, a little suburb of Los Angeles. We get on the elevator, ride the elevator up to the 4th floor. The 4th floor opens up into an actual office suite itself. We walk right past the receptionist and into this office. And Mayor Bradley walks in, he looks at the gentleman sitting behind the desk, he says, "This is the young man I was talking to you about." And the man sitting behind the desk looks at me and he says, "So you want to go to West Point, huh?" And not really wanting to make the mayor look odd and not really understanding how this conversation came about, I said, "Well, it sounds like it might be a good option." Yeah. That person sitting on the other side of the desk was Congressman Julian C. Dixon for the 8th Congress District of California.
Is that right?
And as a result of that interaction and that conversation, I got an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point.
Wow. And so you attended West Point?
I did. I had an opportunity to do all 4 years, complete my degree program at West Point. I played football. I was a walk-on football player, so I played defensive back at West Point on the Army football team. We were 2-2 versus the Navy with 2 Commanders in Chief trophy. That seems to be the only thing that matters. Obviously beating the Air Force as well. We also did 3 bowl games during my time there as well. And then I also ran track at the military academy as well.
Mm-hmm. So you left the United States Military Academy and enlisted in the Army. Is that correct?
I did. I was enlisted prior to going to the military academy.
Okay.
So I did my basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. From basic training, I went off to the military academy. Has a preparatory school, so it's a 1-year school to prepare folks who are going into the military academy.
I see.
So I went to the preparatory school, achieved the rank of, I guess, PFC, which is an E3 in the military. Then I went off to the military academy, did 4 years at the military academy, completed my degree at the military academy. But unlike the graduates of the military academy, I didn't graduate with a degree. I didn't graduate with a commission, but I did get my degree.
Yes.
And so when I came back into the military on active duty, I went back into the military as a specialist or an E4, and then got rapidly promoted to E5 and then rapidly promoted to E6 Staff Sergeant, and that was my rank coming out of the military.
And that gave you a little bit of credibility amongst the enlisted force, having been a graduate of West Point. Is that right?
It did. It gave me a little bit of credibility, and in fact, it was really neat because when I went to my very first unit in Germany, I was assigned to the 10th Engineer Battalion in Germany, and when I arrived at that unit, the typical process when you arrive at a unit is either the commander or the sergeant major will come out and greet everybody who's coming in, have a few words and so forth. And on that day, the commander, Lieutenant Colonel, came out, had us standing in formation. He's going down doing an inspection, and as he's walking and standing in front of each one of us one at a time, he stands in front of me and he says, "So where's the key?" And I had a little puzzled look on my face, still standing at attention with a puzzled look on my face, and I said, "Sir, I do not understand." The colonel kind of chuckled a little bit. He asked the question again, "So where's the key?" I said, "Sir, I do not understand." The colonel chuckled again. The reason he was chuckling is because at the military academy, anytime someone asks you a question, your responses are either yes, sir, no, sir, or sir, I do not understand. So when I was saying, "Sir, I do not understand," he was validating that I had that West Point background. And so finally, after he chuckled a second time, I came from my staring attention state to actually looking and seeing who he was, and came to realize that he was one of my instructors while I was at West Point.
How interesting.
And the reason he was asking about the key is because I spent so much time in the engineering library at West Point that they gave me the key, and I would always unlock and lock the door for the library, and he was making reference to the fact that I held on to that key.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So, did you have a major at West Point? Is there a major just like any other university?
Absolutely. Well, West Point is one of the top tier engineering universities in the U.S. So it's a regular 4-year university with the added leadership component and the military component to it. So my degree was in engineering management, and I chose that degree because I didn't want to, at the time, I didn't want to specify in any particular field of engineering, but I wanted an engineering background. I wanted to be able to problem solve. I wanted to be able to think analytically. I wanted to be able to work with other engineers, and as an engineer manager, my job is more of a project manager where I bring together civil engineers and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers all coming together on a particular project.
I see. Okay. Was there anyone on the faculty at West Point that influenced you?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I played football at West Point, so there were a couple people. We had a colonel who oversees all of the football players that are part of the Army football team. He serves as our tactical officer. And then we also, my coach as a defensive back coach, was an active duty Army captain. And both of those individuals sewed into my life the entire time, not only what I was doing on the football field, but what I was doing off the football field. So we had an opportunity often to have dinner at each one of those individuals' homes, to learn more about what it was like to be in the military, to learn about the different qualities of an officer and the different roles of an officer, and just build relationship. And I stayed in touch with both of those individuals throughout my life.
So what about when you were an enlisted man? Did anyone influence you there?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, when I landed at my very first unit in 10th Engineer Battalion in Germany, the colonel was losing his Personal Services Non-Commissioned Officer, otherwise known as a PSNCO. It's an E7 or a Sergeant First Class position. And the colonel looked at me and he said, well, Patrick, I'm losing my PSNCO, but instead of requesting a new E7 to fill that slot, I'm pretty confident that you can handle that slot. And I was an E4 specialist at the time. Wow. And so he put me in that role as the PSNCO. So I served as in an E7 slot as an E4, and as I mentioned, within 6 months I was promoted to E5, and in 6 months after that I was promoted to E6. That promotion process requires 2 schools. So one school was the primary leadership development course to go from E4 to E5. Obviously, because I'd had that background at West Point, I was the top graduate in the primary leadership development course, and I served as the rank that I had in that course was Sergeant Major, and ran all the drills for the folks that were in that course, and I graduated #1. Same thing happened when I went from E5 to E6. You go to the basic non-commissioned officers course to get that next promotion. And in the basic non-commissioned officer course, once again, because of my West Point background, I was a top graduate in that basic non-commissioned officer course, served as the unit's sergeant major during that time frame as well.
And what was your branch and specialty?
My branch was Corps of Engineers, and so I was a combat engineer. Right. I got a chance to do my childhood dream. I got a chance to build bridges and then blow them up and so forth. So that was a lot of fun for me.
I imagine so. And where did you have to go to training for that?
So for combat engineering, that was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and in fact, prior to when I left West Point, I went back to Los Angeles to go to graduate school for mechanical engineering and operations research at the University of Southern California, USC. But prior to finishing that degree, I was called back on active duty. Well, at that time, I was dating a young lady. And when I got called back to active duty, I had to report to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for combat engineer training. Right. And so as we get towards the end of combat engineer training, she and I were already engaged and had plans for marriage. Okay. I actually called her from Fort Leonard Wood and say, hey, I've got orders to go to Germany. We need to get married before I go to Germany so I can make sure you are on these orders and you can join me in Germany. Sure. So forth. So between Fort Leonard Wood and Germany, we took off and went to Las Vegas and got married. I left Las Vegas and went to Germany, and then a couple weeks later, she joined me in Germany.
And what were your duties in your assignment? Particularly, you were working for that colonel. Tell me a little bit more about what your duties were.
So sure, as the PSNCO, or Personal Services Non-Commissioned Officer, my job is the human resources for the battalion. Okay. There's over 900 servicemen and women in the battalion. It's a combat unit, so they were all men in the battalion. So over 900 men in the battalion, 26 different occupational specialties. So everything from mechanics to truck drivers to supply specialists, but there are 26 different specialties in the battalion. And my job was to assign individuals to their individual units based upon their skill set and their job descriptions, and then also to to enroll them in different programs that would help them with their career. So those that needed to go to airborne school or wanted to go to airborne school, those that wanted to go to advanced training, my job was to enroll them and register them for the different programs, training related to help them on their career path, both the enlisted and the officers. That was the job of the PSNCO. So I did that for 18 months. And then 18 months later, I moved into operations for the headquarters unit. So now I'm responsible for the operations of headquarters, which means I'm managing all the training and operations and everything that this individual unit is doing.
I see.
And then just about 6 months prior to me getting out of the military, I went from the headquarters unit to what's called Charlie Company. Charlie Company was a bridge building company.
Oh, okay.
This was during the first Gulf War. So the entire battalion was sent to the first Gulf War, except for Charlie Company, which was my company. So again, I was fortunate not to have to be actually deployed by being part of that Charlie Company unit.
And you trained people in preparation?
We did. So there's a territory in Germany called Grafenwehr. Grafenwehr is where they host what they call the return of forces to Germany, otherwise known as reforger exercises. During the first Gulf War, a lot of that reforger exercise was converted to a cohort training to do high impact training for those folks that were being shipped off to the Gulf War.
I see.
So for the 10th Engineer Battalion and other units in Germany, part of the 3rd Infantry Division, prior to being shipped off to the Gulf, they would come over to Reforger to do Reforger training, and then from there they would go off to the Gulf War. My unit was assigned to, or Charlie Company was assigned to Reforger training at Grafenwehr, so we trained those folks on their way to the Gulf War.
Did you lose anyone that was close to you during the Gulf War period?
You know, I lost several friends and classmates as part of the Gulf War, both in training exercise and in combat over there. As a matter of fact, this year, actually we're in 2022 now, but in 2021, West Point Class of 86 celebrated its 35th year reunion.
Oh, wow.
And our reunion we held at the Texas Rangers Stadium, Globe Life Stadium here, where Army played Air Force in that football game.
Ah, yes.
It was, so for our alumni events, our 35th reunion, we actually had a memorial ceremony for all of our classmates from the class of 86 whom we lost from the first Gulf War on and so forth the entire time. In fact, my roommate we lost during 9/11. He was in one of the towers during 9/11, Douglas Gurian. And then a couple of my football teammates, Leighton Drisdale, Terrence Green, several others that were my classmates from the football team, we lost either between 9/11, the first Gulf War, 9/11, and war since then.
How did you deal with those losses?
Well, you know, we understand when we sign up for the military that that's par for the course. You know, when you think about it, when you sign up for the military, you make a commitment to give your all.
Yeah.
And that all might, in fact, be your life. And so we all understand that. We hope that we don't have to go to war. We hope that we don't have to fight, so we always prepared for it. We hope that we don't die in battle or any other training exercises or anything of that nature, but we're prepared for it. It's tough to prepare emotionally, but mentally we're prepared for it. And then that mental preparation helps us emotionally. We're a band of brothers across the nation and across the world, and so anytime we lose someone, we stay connected to those of us who have survived and those of us that are still around, and we memorialize those who we've lost. We remember the value, we remember their smiling face, and remember the things that they did as part of the unit and part of the organization.
So your last 6 months in the Army was in Germany, is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, most of my time in the military was spent in Germany, other than training bases.
And you were married during that time. Did you have any children?
We did. So
Okay.
my wife and I, we have 4 grown children now, 3 boys and 1 girl. At the time when we were in Germany, we had 2 boys and our daughter with us in Germany, so forth. And it's interesting because when they first came over to Germany, my wife had never really been outside of Los Angeles.
Right.
And so now her first trip is an international trip. Mm-hmm. They go through London to land in Germany. Yeah. And when they land in Germany during that time, because of some of the conflict that was going on worldwide, the folks in the airport in Germany were walking around carrying automatic weapons.
Right.
My wife had never seen that, where you get off in the airport and you see servicemen walking around in their uniform, German soldiers walking around in their uniforms, carrying rifles and so forth and other automatic weapons and so forth. So it was really surprising for her. And so when she got off the plane, I actually wasn't there to greet her. I was hiding there at the airport, waiting to let her get off the plane. And she gets off the plane and she's expecting me to meet her there. And instead, I'm hiding somewhere there in the airport, and I'm watching her reaction as she and her 2 kids at the time, because the daughter wasn't born yet. So her and the 2 boys, I'm watching their reaction as they're looking around the airport and seeing these soldiers and these rifles and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden I come out and surprise them. What a trip.
What a trip is right.
Indeed.
So how did you communicate with your family back home?
Well, back then we didn't have cell phones, right? So everything was on the hard line.
Right.
So you really had to get to the phone when you can. We had pay phones in Germany, so you had to get to the phone when you could, go to the pay phone. Schedule the time with your family members in the States, let them know when you're going to be calling so that they were always available. Mm-hmm. And then if I recall, we may have had a phone in the unit that we had access to as well. Mm-hmm. So occasionally we can use the phone in the unit on scheduled calls to make those calls back to the States. And that's how we stayed in touch. But it was a lot of letter writing, right? Yeah. So you got really good at doing short letters and doing short cards and things of that nature to stay in touch.
Right.
It's interesting, just prior, one of the reasons I left the military, we were involved in the first Gulf War, and again, I was assigned at Grafenwehr. My wife and kids are now home in Los Angeles. So when our units got shipped to the first Gulf War, and I got sent to Grafenwehr, I sent my family home to Los Angeles in anticipation that I might be headed to the Gulf as well. So my family's home in Los Angeles, and I can remember calling home one day from Grafenwehr, and I could hear my son excited in the background running to the phone. He was about 3-4 years old at the time, but I can hear him excited in the background. Is that daddy? Is that daddy? Is that daddy on the phone? He gets on the phone and he says, hey dad, guess what? We just saw the pizza man get robbed. Ooh. And literally my face just dropped.
Yeah.
And I said, awesome, son. Okay, so how's everything else going? I had a little brief conversation with him, and I said, well, let me talk back to your mom.
Right.
He puts my wife back on the phone, and I said, sweetheart, I'm getting out of the military. I was at that point where I either had to re-enlist, which would have taken me over 10 years, and if I went over 10, I would have stayed for 20. Sure. So right now I was at 9 years, and it was either re-enlist and go to 10, which would have made me go to 20, or get out now. And it was because of that conversation and that phone call that I said, you know what, I need to get out. I need to be home with my kids and my wife and so forth. Right. And so that year, I got out of the military.
How did you deal with the stress of Army service, being overseas, even being at the military academy? How did you deal with stress? Well,
my good mentor and friend John Maxwell once said, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so the same way that I dealt with stress then is the same way that I deal with stress now. And first of all, it's just recognizing what I control and what I don't control. Mm-hmm. And understanding the things that I don't control are just that. I don't control them. Mm-hmm. And I have to accept them and learn how to work in spite of what the impact might be, so to speak. Right. The other thing is, a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, interaction with folks that are around me, making sure that I stay surrounded by people who are positive, encouraging, who share my vision, who lift me up, so forth, and staying connected to family, making sure that when I'm off from work, that I'm off from work, and that I'm actually focused on family and family activities. That's really the way to deal with stress. And when I'm separated from them, recognizing that just having those moments where I can privately go in my mind so as though they're actually present with me. So I can literally go into a meditative state where I can actually feel myself sitting there having a conversation with my wife or hanging out at the beach with my kids. And even if it's just for that slight moment, it allows me to deal with the stress of whatever's around me.
That's a good outlook.
Yeah.
So how long did you serve in total?
So I have a total of 9 years. So 1 year prior to going to the military academy at the prep school, 4 years at the prep school, and then 4 years after the military, 4 years at the military academy, and then 4 years after the military academy. So a total of 9 years.
And what was your rank when you got out?
My rank was Staff Sergeant, which is an E6.
Okay. And were you awarded any medals or citations while you were in?
I did. So I don't remember my exact numbers, but I know I have two what they call RCOMs or Army Commendation Medals. Yes. I have two AAMs, which is Army Achievement Medals, obviously the Good Conduct Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal for serving over in Germany, a couple other medals that I don't recall the different names of the medals that I have. I think the most significant one is probably the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and probably my Army Achievement Medals. One Army Achievement Medal I got for, I won was called the Audie Murphy Leadership Award. So when I was at the Basic Non-Commissioned Officers Course, part of the 3rd Infantry Division training course, as the #1 graduate, I won was called the Audie Murphy Leadership Award, and that came with an Army Achievement Medal.
Wow.
Yes.
Are there any specific experiences or people you remember, anybody who made you laugh?
Yeah, I would say there's a funny story that I'll share now. It probably wasn't funny at the time that it occurred, but it's funny now that I look back on it. Our unit, the 10th Engineer Battalion, in fact, the entire military installation there in Kitzingen, Germany, was having a picnic, a big picnic for all the family and all the servicemen and women that were on that particular military installation. And it was my responsibility as the operations sergeant at that time to put up all the tents that were going to be on the parade field where the picnic was taking place, where all the barbecue pits were and so forth. And so I'm in charge of this detail of putting up the tents. And the tents have a rope on them with an anchor on the end of the rope so that you can anchor the tent to the ground. Right. And as we were putting up the tents, we're going through this heave-ho exercise. And as I say heave-ho, the soldiers are raising up the tent, and as they raise up the tent, the rope from one of the tents swings out, the anchor catches my nose and rips my nose and splits my nose in half, and all of a sudden I'm gushing with blood. And as I mentioned, it wasn't funny at the time, but when you look back of it, you think, how weird is that to actually have that anchor grab your nose? So they sewed my nose back together, so on and so forth. So that's one of the funny incidents that occurred, and I still look back and laugh on how that happened.
So who sewed your nose up?
One of the medics came over and so forth.
That speaks to the quality of military medicine. I was a
Absolutely.
I was a medic in the Air Force. That's why I'm saying that.
There you go. That's right.
Because it looks good.
There you go.
Did you experience any discrimination while you were in the service? And tell me how that hindered your career.
You know, while I was on active duty in the military, most of my time was with the 10th Engineer Battalion, and it was a great, great time for me. As I mentioned, the colonel over the battalion commander, was one of my instructors from West Point, so he remembered me. When I went down to the line unit, the headquarters unit, the lieutenant or the executive officer for the unit was an underclassman with me at West Point. So I was a senior at West Point, and this person was one of my yearlings, which means he was in his year 2 or his 2nd year at West Point while I was in my senior year at West Point. And so forth. So on active duty and within the military, I didn't really experience any discrimination. Right. But what I learned later on is that I had experienced discrimination while I was at the military academy that I wasn't quite aware of. While I was on active duty, I ran into one of my classmates from West Point, and he looks at me and he says, I was wearing my staff sergeant insignia, so he's recognizing I was at West Point, but I'm not an officer. And he says, it's sad what they did to you at West Point. And I asked the question, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he mentioned the discrimination event that I wasn't aware was discrimination at the time. So while I was at the military academy, I was responsible for an organization that hosts Black History Observance Month activities. They're responsible for, West Point is not only a four-year university, but it's actually a military installation. So it has regular duty folks all over. And this organization, this cadet organization, is responsible for all of the activities that happened during February. I was the chairman or the program manager for organizing all of those events. We had put all of those events together and so forth, and we had a budget that we had put together for it, so forth. The academy gave us additional dollars, so we had a little over $35,000 to host these events. But I was advised that what we were going to do in this particular year was have a different type of event that was more scaled down. I was a little disappointed, but I'm a serviceman. I'm a cadet at the time, and it's 3 bags full. That's the event that we're going to have, and so I go back to my team and report that that's the event that we're going to have. Through some other conversations that I'm having with some other senior folks at the military academy, I was called back into the office that had made the decision that we were going to scale down the event. And I was told we could go ahead and now have the event as we had originally planned it, which was a huge event. We had Brian Gumbo coming in, we had 3-star generals and 1-star generals that were coming in that were African American. We had politicians that were coming in, all to be part of this round table for Black History Observance Month and so forth. And so we ended up having the event the way that we had originally planned it. During that same time frame, I lost my father. So I left and went home to Los Angeles, came back from Los Angeles. When I came back from Los Angeles, strange things started to happen to me at West Point. I started to get demerits. I'm in my senior year. I'm not supposed to be getting demerits the way I was getting demerits in my senior year. My rank at the academy was battalion adjutant. So I'm responsible for inspecting folks to give out demerits. So if I'm inspecting folks to give out demerits, you obviously know I know how to not get demerits on my own. But every day I would come back to my room and I was getting demerits for water and sink, trash and trash can, blinds not open properly, or coat hangers not evenly spaced. And I thought I was just off my game because I had just lost my father. But what I later found out from my classmate was that this was all an intentional action by certain folks at the military academy because of how we executed Black History Month activities and the fact that they didn't want those activities to go off the way that we had planned them and so forth. And so as a result, that's one of the reasons why when I left West Point, I left with a degree, but I didn't leave with a commission.
You still had a very successful event.
I did. We still had a great event, and I still had a successful military career, even though it was a short career. My intent from the very beginning was to go to West Point, get West Point on my resume, do my time in the military and get out. But I had thought from the time that I had spent at West Point, I had become a lifer. I decided that West Point, that military was going to be my career. But after that incident and not getting my commission, it was a different path for me.
What reminds you of your time in service? Is there music or sounds or what reminds you of when you served?
Well, the thing that reminds me most of when I serve is the role that I play right now. So I actually run an organization right now that stays connected to servicemen and women who are in transition. So I am on military installations in Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas every month, talking to and interacting with those individuals who are 18 months prior to transitioning out of the military. It's called the Transition Assistance Program. And I actually go in and teach a 2-day boot camp to teach these individuals how to start and grow businesses as an option for their transition out of the military. The Transition Assistance Program has 4 layers to it. 18 months prior to folks getting out of the military, they can go through this course and learn how to use their educational benefits and go back to school for a degree. They can go, that's taught by the Department of Education, or they can go through the Department of Labor program and learn how to get a job, so they learn how to do interviews, fill out their resume, how to dress for success and things of that nature. Or they can go through, again, through the Department of Labor and learn how to go to trade school and get different certifications and project management certifications and other certifications to go on that path as an apprentice. And then the final path is the path that I teach. That's taught by or delivered by the U.S. Small Business Administration. Thus, for individuals who are interested in starting or growing a business, we teach a 2-day boot camp to help those individuals understand that entrepreneurship and owning your own business is a viable option for your transition out of the military.
When did this program begin?
This program actually was launched by legislation in 2008. The first groups came on board, or the first courses or programs came on board in 2012, and then my program came on board in 2016. So I've been doing this since 2016. We have delivered these courses to a little more than 3,800, my office, to a little more than 3,800 servicemen and women transitions, and as a result, we've helped start a little more than 1,200 businesses since 2016. The program overall by the U.S. Small Business Administration, known as the Boosted Business Program, has, as of last year, trained, actually 2019, trained over 100,000 folks through that program, and so forth. I don't know what our numbers are right now today, but 2019 we reached our 100,000 attendee through that program.
Wow, that's quite a record of success.
Yes.
So if you could serve in the military, would you do it all over again?
You know, absolutely. If I got called back to active duty and I could add value to any conflict that we're in, or add value to the lives of those that I would be working alongside of, I'd be more than happy to go back and serve. But I would not change any part of my life, whether it's not getting my commission and serving as an enlisted soldier, where I had an opportunity to feel both worlds, because as an enlisted soldier, I was part of the ranks and down and in with the grunts and so on and so forth, and had that respect. But because I had a West Point background, and many of the officers knew of my West Point background, I had the respect of many of the officers. Right. Many of my classmates today, they stay connected to me. I'm still participating in the alumni events. I have 3-star generals that have retired from the military, lots of 2-star generals, a slew of full bird colonels and so forth. And then I have classmates who left the military and are serving in senior roles at major corporations, the CEO of 7-Eleven, former CEO of Mercedes-Benz USA. Across the board, I stay connected to all of these folks. So I love my life. I love the impact that I'm having in the role that I play right now. So I love to continue doing what I'm doing. But if a conflict came and they needed my services and I can add value, I'd be happy to serve.
And you reside, or your office is, I should say, on campus. Is that correct? And how did that come about? It
is. I'm located in the College of Business, and that came about prior to the role that I'm in right now. I work for the Texas Veterans Commission. That's the state-appointed authority for all things veteran in the state of Texas. And I helped launch what's called the Veteran Entrepreneur Program. The state of Texas legislature actually gives money to help veterans start business in the state of Texas, and they offer certain benefits for those servicemen and women who launch businesses in the state of Texas. I helped launch that program in 2012. And in 2016, 4 years later, the U.S. Small Business Administration had a funding opportunity that was going to be doing the exact same thing in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So Texas Veterans Commission was competing for that funding opportunity, and at the last minute, the legislature pointed out that because that funding opportunity was going to also cover Arkansas and Oklahoma, we could not mix state resources with those federal resources and serve other states. So the director of the Texas Veterans Commission looked at me and said, Patrick, you were going to be the director of this program anyway. Why don't you just take this program and run with it? My offices were already here at the University of Texas at Arlington because I was representing in North Texas as part of Texas Veterans Commission. So I covered all of North Texas. And so I got with one of the professors over in the College of Business, Dr. Edmund Prater. He and I revised that grant from a Texas Veterans Commission proposal to a UTA proposal. And 3 days later, we submitted that proposal to the U.S. Small Business Administration, which we won. That was 2015, and we've been here ever since. We're on our third iteration of that funding opportunity, providing those services to servicemen and women on military installations in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas.
Wow, that's great. What advice do you have for other young people who are looking at entering the military or who are entering the military?
You know, that's a great question. And the best advice that I have for anyone who's thinking about entering the military is great thought, follow your path and follow and do that. And if you're not thinking of the military, you should be thinking of the military. I think it's important for everyone who calls themselves a U.S. citizen to serve in some capacity. I think it changes our mindset and helps us to get a better understanding of what the cost of freedom truly is. I think when you have an opportunity to wear the uniform or be a military spouse standing next to someone wearing the uniform, you get a chance to travel to some of the countries and get deployed, then you have a better understanding of what it costs for us to be free.
Right.
You have a different mindset. So I think everyone should serve. And the advice that I would have is whether you were thinking of serving it or not, everyone should serve. The last piece of advice that I would have is for those of you who have not served, when you think of a veteran, don't think of a veteran's incapacity, because veterans are more than their incapacity. Veterans are more than their physical incapacity of a missing limb or something of that nature. They're more than their mental incapacities of post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury or any of the other hidden ailments that they may have. They're more than homeless people. They're more than folks with financial literacy issues. Veterans actually are entrepreneurs who continue to serve in businesses beyond the battlefield. Veterans are the same individuals who started GoDaddy. Veterans are the same individuals who launched and started FedEx. Veterans are the same individuals who launched and started other veteran-owned businesses that are out there that are continuing to grow the economy and impact the communities where they live and they serve. So when you think of a veteran, don't think of a veteran's incapacity. Think of a veteran's capacity to do more, be more, and give more of their uniqueness to the world in which they live and they serve.
Well said. So is there anything that you would like to add to this interview that we have not discussed?
I think we've discussed pretty much everything we can discuss at this point. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this documentary, part of this process. I appreciate the fact that you and the university have noticed and recognized the value of the veteran as part of the university community, as part of the overall community, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you, and we appreciate you sharing your story. It's been great.
Thanks
very much.